As you know, the U.S. just recently bombed 3 alleged Iranian nuclear sites. You've heard many of the stories, the rumors, conspiracy theories, maybe, and such. So I wanted to offer a bit of a more maybe grounded perspective on things with a couple of shocking theories of why this may be happening based on what I'm being shown from spirit through channeling and stuff like that, as well as some summer psychic predictions in terms of like Donald Trump's future, World War III, all those kind of things. So I have everything written down in my notes. So I'm going to get to that. So I'll get to a few startling psychic predictions for the summer of 2025 in a moment. But let's break this all down for a second and explain what I see moving forward, basically. So this happened mere days after I told you in my last video on the summer psychic forecast that we just did, that I had a vision of bombs being dropped in the Middle East around Iran, and that the U.S. getting either pulled into the war. Basically, that's I think how I worded it in that, and certainly that happened. Now the claim is that Iran is a nuclear threat, so that's what the U.S. government's telling us. A threat to the world, the capability of having weapons of mass destruction, and the president basically said that that this was a planned strike and attack, that Iran was notified so that the areas could be cleared and everything. That it wasn't meant as an act of war, but that the theory is, or what we're being told is, that this was necessary to stabilize the region, to not allow Iran to have these nuclear capabilities so that they could talk about peace, or they could draw up peace plans, basically. So the claim is that there was notification for the attack and that lives were not lost, and that no Americans will step on Iranian soil. So that's the claim anyway. So if you love Donald Trump, great. If you hate Donald Trump, you're welcome here also. This isn't about who's right or who's wrong. It's bigger than that. This is about the changes that are going on in humanity, basically. So it's not about the divide right now. So let's just a little bit of perspective that the medium channel, this is about spiritual awakening, but spiritual awakening can't happen to its fullest if there's a lack of situational awareness, and part of that's political awareness. So basically, if I'm going to do psychic forecasts, we've got to talk about politics, right? So the thing is, you can't stop war with war. You can only stop war with peace. Just like you can't stop love with hate. You can't stop hate with hate. You can only stop hate with love. That's a quote from Martin Luther King, by the way. And regardless of the reasons, if there is real justification that we don't know about or whatever, if you go into another country's borders and bomb sites in that country, that is an act of war, bottom line. So the claim is that they did everything constitutionally and informed Congress right after the attack. So, and anyway, you can take that, and you can leave your thoughts on that in the comments if you want. But the thing is, when it comes to war, nobody wins, basically. The country that's declared the winner is the country that loses less than the other country. That's the bottom line. We've got to figure things out. Maybe this is primitive humans' last dance, but we've got to figure this out. Now, granted, this came through legacy news, so you can take it for what it's worth, but what I heard is that that our president, Donald Trump, was giving Iran 2 weeks basically before any action, and then a couple days after that came out, then the bombings happened. So given the reason for the bombing from available information, and we can talk about Iran's nuclear program, could it shifted from nuclear energy, started in the 1950s with some U.S. backing, by the way, to around 1979, it shifted into development of weapons based on the Iran-Iraq conflicts, and hold on a sec. And as of the early 1990s, we were told to fear Iran, as they had they didn't have any nuclear weapons yet, but had the capability to develop that. Now, fast forward to 2025, 30 years later, we're being told the same thing, that no, there's no actual nuclear weapons, but the capability exists to develop them. And in 2015, this was called the GCPOA, was enacted. It was a treaty basically to curb Iran's nuclear program. And again, that was done in 2015 in the Obama administration. But then in 2018, during Trump's first administration, that the U.S. pulled out of that agreement, kind of saying that it was horrible and useless, basically. So again, it's fair to note that this is all coming from legacy news. We don't know all the details, right? And unless we have inside information, basically. So we know war is profitable. It drives the power structure on the planet. It drives the money and everything. There's often agendas behind the agendas that we don't hear, but it drives the agendas for more control over the masses, basically. And it's very profitable to certain parties, basically. It also distracts people, raises their fear, anger, makes them more compliant to getting their freedoms taken away, basically. So after this happened, what's going to be next? Something like, well, we need to tighten security, so you have to get this form of ID. You have to allow AI to spy on you through your computer technology. We have to enact the smart cities, basically. The list goes on and on. So think about what happened after 9/11, and then there's the Patriot Act. So that could be part of the agenda also. It's going to level more control, more and stuff like that. So moving right along here. Next, you'll see more things like tightened AI security monitoring and censorship and centralizing of currency and things like that. It's interesting to note that Iran let the that Iran is one of the few countries. So it's interesting to note this, that's not part of the global World Bank, and they use their own banking system, basically. There's a lot of intrigue around Israel also, and I won't get into detail around that, but strategic maneuvering is a strong possibility, given the geopolitical structure of the world. There's theories around a cabal or a deep state that controls certain countries, like Israel, for example, and things of that nature. So there's always a purpose for war, and most of wars fought on the cyber battlefield anyway. This is the tip of the iceberg that we're seeing. But it's not all doom and gloom, and we are powerful. Group prayer has been known in the past to curb violence and to help things. So the more we can raise our vibration, and the more people that do that, the more we can soften this energy and maybe lean in more towards diplomatic solutions than this escalating. Because again, whatever the motivations that the U.S. had, this will be seen as an act of war, and it will be responded to accordingly. So this is part of what I see moving on in the future. So some predictions and raising the frequency. With some of the predictions, if we raise the frequencies, it can change the timelines and change some of these outcomes. It's not written in stone because we're in a current timeline, and the vibration in this current timeline, that's all people like myself that do predictions in the future can draw upon. The energies now and what visions come through or what feelings come through based on how that's likely to play out. But if we change the energy the now, we can change the progression of timelines, and it doesn't have to be a full-on World War III. And I'm going to maintain my original prediction that I don't see World War III happening, though you could argue it already is, and I get that. But to the point where it's like this devastating war on the world that's going to lay everything to waste. I think we're going to fall short of that, but we're still ramping up in that direction, to keep an eye on that. So, couple of predictions. One is that I saw an explosion underground in New York City before these attacks, basically, and I meant to have that in my last video, and I think I forgot to mention it, but it looked like 42nd Street. I'm from Manhattan. It looked like East Side 42nd Street, not far from where the bridge is that goes down towards the East River, for if there's any Manhattanites watching. and close to First Avenue. But somewhere in the city, terrorist attacks are likely to increase, but this will likely be blamed on terrorists, blamed on Iranians, but rather being an inside job. So again, I'm sorry for those that think that I'm putting my tinfoil hat on, but this is just information that I'm receiving. And we know there's a lot of intrigue, and we know that things like this have happened in the past. Think of 9/11 and what's coming out, that attacks happen. It appears to be one way, but then as more information comes up, people start to question it. Nothing's proven, not with 9/11, to the saddest, what's the right word, to satisfy that it absolutely happened that way, but there is mounting and significant evidence that points in that direction. So in general, hopefully we won't see any underground explosions and fires and terrorist attacks in New York City. But that said, generally speaking, terrorist attacks are likely to increase. That's how some nations fight their wars, because they feel disadvantaged, basically. So they use other means, like guerrilla tactics and such. So strong demonstrations near the White House. I actually picked up on this during tarot time on Sunday. So we're likely to see that, peace movements. It's kind of like Vietnam, although there's no drafts yet, at least. Hopefully there won't be to protest against. But I do see some building of the U.S. military, and there may be a modified draft by the end of the year. I actually had a prediction way back saying that would happen in June. We're almost done with June. It ain't happening good. I'll eat crow on that one, but I still feel like there's some chances that we can move forward in that direction later on the year. Again, depending on what happens, timelines are fluid. So big cyber attacks, the financial institutions, governments, stuff like that. U.S. bases being attacked. There could be an attack on U.S. soil, but it's more likely to be, again, terrorist stuff. And it could be from Middle Eastern, but again, be aware of the possibility of an inside job to, again, create a certain narrative to get people to believe a certain thing, to justify certain action to follow. And again, there are agendas from the deep state or cabal, the centralized control and power, and there could be a lot of geopolitical maneuvering in order to make that happen, and a fair amount of gaslighting or false information, or skewing the information to create a different narrative than what's actually going down, if that makes sense. So there's also the potential for Russia to bomb Israel, maybe China too, but there's that. I feel like it gets a little bit dicey with peace negotiations, but I think that can start to happen later July or August. Believe it or not, I still feel there's a possibility between Russia and Ukraine more than the Middle East at this point. I was also seeing a lot of smoke in New York City. Whatever that means. Hopefully not a lot of fires. Period of coastal flooding, where rivers around Manhattan spill over the banks, like the East River and the Hudson River. So there could be some big tropical activity moving forward. Also seeing a financial tumble, then a reset. Though I do see some I can't even read my writing, but I do see some investments hitting later in the year, especially. So I don't want to say a crash. I want to call this more of a reset. But if stock prices fall, which happens when there's a specter of war anyway, it'll recover. It'll reset. And if you're a savvy investor, you can make a lot of money during this. And one of the things I'd encourage everybody is to invest in silver while it's still relatively low, because it's likely to go up. So I've started to hear of silver shortages. I bought mine a while ago when it was trading at 22 an ounce, so it's up to 36 now. And if there is a major war, a lot of silver is used in weapons. And you have to also think about this, that the bombs, the attack. I forgot the dollar amount, but I think we're talking over half a trillion dollars to carry out the strikes, developing the weapons and everything like that. So we have money to fund these wars by the trillions of dollars, but we can't feed the hungry, basically. So, more people that wake up and just see that they're being, programmed and hypnotized, then things will start to change. Power to the people. We are powerful when we're aligned and we're connected. We're weak when we're divided. So a lot of the politics and a lot of the beliefs that are programmed into us are to divide and conquer, to really hate the other side and to create scenarios that would foster that hate, like things that Donald Trump is doing, for example. But there could be a higher agenda to keep people distracted, to keep them angry, and that way they're more easy to control. And the agendas to centralize money and power and to seize more power and further enslavement of the masses gets willingly carried out because the people are so scared they'll do anything, basically, right? So what else? Also watch the New Madrid fall. We've been talking about that a lot, the one that runs along the Mississippi, because they were showing me a large fracture in that, and there could be an earthquake anytime. So be prepared, not scared. Things happen. Right, that. And remember, this is, according to prophecies, the end times. The end time just means the end of the old archaic and the rebirth of new earth, or the birth of new earth. So it's not a bad thing. Nations at war, fires, floods. These were all part of the prophecies from many different traditions. It's a tough teardown, but it's a necessary change for humanity's evolution, basically. Prayers for the best possible outcome, for the least amount of suffering, for a smoother transition, and that humanity awakens. Remember, again, war solves nothing. Citizens of every country lose. The globalists, the elite, they're the only ones that win, and they fulfill their dark agenda at the cost of so many. It is a primitive human's last stand, what I'm seeing right now. It's all still connected to the collective human ego running the show, basically, and edging God out, as the saying goes. So keep the prayers and keep the faith. Remember, prayers can move mountains, and it's been shown that when a lot of people pray for an intention like peace, they do notice that. Tibetan monks are doing this. A lot of people are working. And what I've seen happening in the past, what I see happening in the future is these terrible doom and gloom prophecies come up. I mean, I'm not about doom and gloom, but it may appear that way sometimes with the things I'm saying. But when it happens, but to a degree that's lesser than what could be. And I do believe that raising the consciousness and the prayers and the positive energy in the collective is really responsible for mitigating some of the more difficult timelines around that. So anyway, what else do we have? And I think that we'll get through it. I think it'll be challenging, but I think this too won't be quite as bad as what we're fearing. And we have to stay in our heart, stay in our power. Don't let them program you. Stay in your heart, stay in your power. Be prepared. If you're prepared, then you don't have to be as scared, right? And the more in your heart and the more you're vibrating gratitude and love, that helps to dispel this fear, and it helps to rebridge the connection that you have with your own divinity or God or source, basically. All the fear programming severs that connection with divinity and makes us weak, vulnerable, and easy to control. When you work with the heart frequencies, you enhance the heart-brain connection. You connect more with spirit, and then through prayer, you connect more with spirit or God or source, and you become more powerful. And we're going to be okay. God's in charge. We have higher beings, higher energies that are watching over our evolution. It's just something that's happening to tear down the old, to rebuild the new. So what else do we have? I mean, okay. And I'll leave you with this thought. In the words of Michael Franti, who's an amazing, not just a singer-songwriter, but he's very shamanistic, very wise. The first time I heard him speak, he sounded just like Martin Luther King, very politically aware and on the right page, very connected. And he stands about 6'8" and walks barefoot. So that's another side of Michael Franti. But anyway, in the words of Michael Franti, you can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb the world to peace. So over here, this is the first part of the video that had all my psychic predictions for summer of 2025. And we'll get through this, a lot of prayers, and we'll be doing more prayer work and getting together on the Medium channel to help. I love you.